300 years before Moscow was even a village, one city ruled the heart of Eastern Europe. Its name was Kyiv, and the fight over who truly inherited its legacy is still being fought today. This was Kievan Rus's, a forgotten empire that two modern nations still fight to claim as their own. To understand today's conflict, we have to go back over 1,000 years, to the banks of the Dnieper River. In the 9th century, this land was home to scattered Slavic tribes, without a single ruler or unified state. Without roads or writing systems, knowledge of these early tribes survives mostly through later chronicles and archaeology. These tribes paid tribute to whoever was strongest, with no roads, no laws, and no city to call a true capital. Then, from the cold north, came seafaring warriors and traders known as the Varangians. These were Norse adventurers, sailing not the open ocean, but Eastern Europe's great rivers in search of trade and power. According to the earliest chronicles, local tribes invited a Varangian leader named Rurik to bring order to their land. Rurik settled in Novgorod, planting the first seed of what would become the Rus state. Historians still debate how much of this founding story is fact, and how much is later legend. But it was his successor, Oleg, who changed history forever. In the year 882, Oleg sailed south down the river and seized a smaller trading town, Kyiv. He declared it the new capital, famously calling it the mother of all Rus cities. From this single decision, an empire was born. Kyiv's location was no accident. It sat directly on the trade route from the Varangians to the Greeks. Furs, honey, and slaves flowed south to Constantinople. Silver, silk, and wine flowed north in return. Merchants from Scandinavia, Byzantium, and the steppe all gathered in Kyiv's busy marketplace. Within a century, Kyiv had grown into one of the largest and wealthiest cities in all of Europe. But wealth alone does not make an empire. Kyiv still needed something greater to bind its people together. That moment came under Prince Vladimir, later remembered as Vladimir the Great. Vladimir ruled a land of many gods, many tribes, and no single faith to unite them. So, according to legend, he sent envoys across the world to study different religions. Islam forbade alcohol, rejected. Judaism lacked a homeland, rejected. Western Christianity felt plain. But Byzantine Christianity, with its golden domes and glittering ceremonies, left his envoys in awe. In the year 988, Vladimir chose Orthodox Christianity and ordered the mass baptism of his people. This single decision tied Kyiv's destiny to Constantinople and shaped the religious identity of an entire region for 1,000 years. Churches, monasteries, and schools soon rose across the city, turning Kyiv into a center of learning as well as trade. Under Vladimir's son, Yaroslav, later called the Wise, Kievan Rus reached the height of its power. Yaroslav issued the first written law code of the Eastern Slavs, known as the Russkaya Pravda. The Russkaya Pravda set one of the earliest legal reforms in Eastern Europe. He built the magnificent St. Sophia Cathedral in Kyiv, rivaling the grandeur of Constantinople itself. Inside, golden mosaics and towering frescoes celebrated both faith and the power of the Rus state. His daughters married kings across Europe, of France, Norway, and Hungary, making Kyiv a true European power. In an age when most of Europe saw the region as remote and barbaric, Kyiv proved itself a peer to any Western kingdom. One daughter, Anne of Kyiv, became Queen of France, later even serving as regent for her young son. Population estimates suggest Kyiv rivaled Paris and London in size, an extraordinary feat for its time. At its height, Kievan Rus stretched from the Baltic Sea in the north to the Black Sea in the south. Craftsmen produced fine jewelry, church bells, and illuminated manuscripts admired far beyond its borders. For a moment, it seemed like Kievan Rus would only grow stronger. But Yaroslav made one fatal decision before his death. He divided his realm among his sons. He believed this would keep peace between his heirs. Instead, it planted the seeds of endless rivalry. Instead of one empire, Rus became a patchwork of rival principalities, each ruled by a different prince. Brothers turned against brothers. Cousins fought cousins. The unity Oleg had built 2 centuries earlier began to crumble. Some princes even invited foreign powers to intervene in their disputes, weakening the region even further. Rival princes even besieged each other's cities, weakening the very state their ancestors had built. Kyiv remained the symbolic capital, but real power drained away to rising cities like Novgorod and Vladimir. Even so, Kyiv's churches and markets remained busy. Few could imagine the devastation that was still decades away. By the early 1200s, what had once been a single mighty state was now dozens of quarreling territories, and divided, weakened, and distracted by their own rivalries. The princes of Rus never saw the true danger coming. Far to the east, a new force was rising, one that would sweep across the entire continent. The Mongol Empire, under the descendants of Genghis Khan, had already conquered most of Asia. Mongol commanders were famous for their discipline, using coded flag and drum signals to coordinate tens of thousands of riders. Their armies were faster, better disciplined, and more coordinated than anything the fractured princes had ever faced. In 1237, Mongol armies turned their attention toward the fractured lands of Rus. City after city fell. Ryazan, Vladimir, Chernihiv, each one besieged and left in ruins. Mongol siege engines, adopted from conquered Chinese engineers, could break down walls that once seemed unbreakable. Few cities in the region had walls strong enough, or defenders numerous enough, to withstand the assault. The divided princes, still fighting among themselves, could offer no unified resistance. Before attacking, Mongol envoys often offered cities a choice: surrender peacefully or face total destruction. Finally, in December 1240, the Mongol horde arrived at the gates of Kyiv itself. Prince Michael of Kyiv had already fled. Those left behind had to defend the city on their own. The city that had stood for over 3 centuries as the heart of an empire was besieged, stormed, and devastated. According to chronicles, when a papal envoy passed through years later, he described finding little more than scattered bones and ash. Of the roughly 50,000 people once living in Kyiv, only a small fraction were said to have survived. The mother of Rus cities had fallen. Kievan Rus, as a unified state, was effectively finished. For the next 2 centuries, these lands would live under Mongol domination, known as the Mongol yoke. Princes now had to travel to distant Mongol capitals just to receive permission to rule their own cities. But the story of Kievan Rus didn't simply end there. It split into 2 very different futures. In the northeast, under Mongol rule, a minor trading post slowly rose in influence. A city called Moscow. Moscow's princes learned to cooperate closely with their Mongol overlords, using that alliance to grow steadily in power. Centuries later, Moscow's princes would claim to be the true heirs of Kyiv's legacy, the foundation of a new state, Russia. But in the western lands, closer to Kyiv itself, a different identity endured, shaped by different neighbors and different rulers. This land would eventually become known as Ukraine, a name meaning, roughly, borderland. For centuries afterward, both nations would look back to the same golden age and claim it as uniquely their own. That long and complicated history is exactly what our next episodes in this series will explore in depth. So the question echoes into our present: who really inherited Kievan Rus, Russia, or Ukraine? In recent years, this ancient question has been used to justify a very modern war. Vladimir Putin has repeatedly argued that Russians and Ukrainians are one people, rooted in this shared Kievan history. Ukrainian historians and leaders reject this claim, pointing out that Kyiv is Ukraine's capital today, not Moscow's. A 1,000-year-old kingdom, and the identity of the people who came after it, is still being fought over, sometimes literally, on the battlefield. What began as a story of Viking traders and a river town has become one of the defining conflicts of the 21st century. Understanding Kievan Rus isn't just an academic exercise. It's the key to understanding the war unfolding today. The empire of Kievan Rus is gone, but its legacy, still very much alive. And as you'll see in the episodes ahead, that legacy has been fought over again and again and again. In our next episode, we'll see how these lands were torn apart for 700 years, caught between rival empires. From Lithuania and Poland to the Russian Empire and the Soviet Union, Ukraine's story is far from over. If you found this history fascinating, make sure to subscribe. We're just getting started on Ukraine's incredible story. Which chapter of history should we explore next? Let us know in the comments below.